we still have a scarcity of competent individuals.
Think about what you are interested in and most passionate about, and then choose a pathway into that.
You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and step out your comfort zone.
Hello and welcome to My Green Future, where we look at career planning through a green lens.
Recently, we caught up with the ex-CEO of Climate Impact X and the former Chief Sustainability Officer of DBS Bank in Singapore. What I really liked about our conversation with Mikkel was how he made a transition throughout his career, where he started as an accountant, but ended up as a CEO of an impact company, really.
Yeah, and it's a great example of how you can actually repurpose your own career path as you go along. And the thing I liked about it was that he also managed to change DBS's business path to make the company more sustainable.
It was a really insightful conversation. So let's listen to it.
You didn't begin in sustainability in your career,
Correct.
Your professional career. Can you tell me about the point in your professional career at which you decided that you wanted to switch your focus to sustainability and to the CSO path, and how you made that transition? What were the first things that you did?
If you want the truth on this story, there was only one long journey towards this, all the way since I was 17. So I think I mentioned to you earlier that since I was 17, there's only two passions in my life. There was wildlife and there was animal welfare, farm animal welfare. But at 17, testosterone normally takes over and I chose a different career path. And already at that point, of course, hindsight is 20/20, but I faithfully, I was already at that point, really, my heart was in those things. My brains and my pride and my everything was, I'm going to go improve myself. So I ended up in the financial industry. And my entire career has actually been finding a way back. But I'll also be very honest with you, as you get into a career and you get more senior, then it's harder and harder to change simply out of comfort of life. So when I started in accounting and became a CPA in my home country, that was as far away as it could possibly get from it. So my first switch was into banking or consultancy and then into banking, which at least felt like I could get some kind of understanding of how money moves and how they could be put to good use. I didn't have a plan at that point in time, but I realized that certainly I could be more good if I understood money flows than if I was only an accountant. And I don't mean anything, because actually it served me really well to be an accountant in many aspects of life. Then the second bit was moving out of Europe and into Asia, where I maybe naively felt that this is where a lot of these things need to happen. But in doing so, I went back into more of an accounting role again, and I became the CFO, regional CFO or controller for UBS. But I was in the right region. And when you're here, as you probably both know, your ability to travel and see and experience with your own eye some of these things is just so much greater. And I spent a lot of time traveling to get it into my heart, because I think if you...
So was the geography of your location relevant because you could travel around and see things, or was it because the opportunity for moving jobs and taking different roles, you just had a wider opportunity?
Of course, I always wanted to live in Asia. So there was a personal, outside my hope to get closer to nature was also an element of wanting to. I fell in love in Singapore very early on for some reason, my first trip outside of Europe, and never mind. But there was a conscious part of that as well, which was, and I still feel that today, and this is, what I'm going to do next has to do with that as well. I think sustainability is one of those things that if you only have it here and not here at all, you'll never be very, very good at it. So you need to see it, you need to feel it, you need to believe it. It's amazing how many people can talk about a no net harm or social benefits or dealing with hunger when they never ever saw it, right? It becomes a piece of paper with some 17 SDGs that we can conceptualize all the way through. But when you see it and when you feel it and you realize the fortitude that you have in living where you are, it just makes so much more impact. And I got that. And in my early travels here from Singapore were to all of those places, and I traveled back since then. But from a career point of view, from an impact point of view, obviously I was not where I wanted to be. And then the opportunity came to move to DBS because I didn't want to go back to Europe again, which was the natural next step for me in UBS. And admittedly, I had not at that point in time thought that I could be the CSO. Such a role didn't exist. I was just fortunate that when sustainability became a straightforward within DBS, I was the least not qualified. Does that make sense? I was the least unqualified. So I put up my hand together with someone else and we formed the sustainability committee. And it took a little bit of time, as it does. And then at some point in time, I felt, well, this could actually be a real role. And I said to the powers to be, I think we need a CSO. And so I became the CSO. And that did a lot of good for my ability to focus on these types of things. When I still, at that point in time, then made the transition to become the CEO of Climate Impact X was because I still felt that there was something missing, and because it was a great opportunity. Let's be honest, nobody has ever asked an accountant to run a company, and I'm sure other people could have done it better than me. But it was trying to marry the commercial side of it with the kind of technical side of it, right? Because if you're a CSO, I had less influence on the commercial decisions that I wanted, and here it was all about that, making money flow to the projects that I cared about. And still, and it's never going to be perfect, Timur and Darian, still I long for being on the ground, right? And so here is perhaps the moral of my story, which is you have to make a hard, conscious decision at some point in time that what makes you feel good in your heart, which in my case would be to be the guy with the spear protecting rhinos day in, day out, is not where you're going to make more use. I'm much better off in a setting where I use the skills that I have from accounting, from finance, from now having learned a little bit about running a company, and then use that for good. Or, and this is a sad truth, take a little bit of the savings that you have from being able to make that money and let other people use it. But that doesn't feel nearly as good in your heart as being, right? That's why so many NGOs out there. There's so many who have their own NGOs because it just makes you feel really, really good. And I still struggle with it today. So my I guess what I'm saying here is try and use the skills that you developed rather than focusing on what makes you feel cute and cuddly.
I think Peter Singer wrote a good book on that, about the most good you can do. But I wanted to ask you about starting out your career as an accountant, because something I often get asked is, what makes a good CSO? Now, I was trained as an engineer and then grew into the role. You trained as an accountant. What do you think the skill set of being an accountant brings to being a chief sustainability officer?
Or an engineer or anything else. I think in an earlier part of sustainability journey, it was almost good enough if you could say people, profit, and planet. But it was never going to be the solution. So I think that if you can bring a hard skill, right, either because you're an engineer in the business, so let's say that you're in airlines or in the fishing industries, if you actually understand that industry because you're an engineer and you knew how to make engines and whatever it is, then you can actually start to add on the sustainability lens to it. But if you have no fundamental core skills, it will always be a little bit lofty. And I felt that for me, the angle in from an accountant point of view was, I can understand reporting, accounting really, really well, right? And so I use that angle to get in and says, if I can get the accounting framework right and the data flow right, at least I have contributed something, because greenhouse gas accounting is complicated stuff, right? And thinking about assets and liabilities when you actually emit carbon is also hard stuff. For an accountant, it's a little bit easier to grasp. We've done debit and credits our entire life. And so it's not about whether you're an accountant or whether you're an engineer. I think that if you have a hard skill that you can bring to something, it's easier to bring the sustainability angle into that rather than coming with if there's such a thing exists, a university degree in sustainability, because you will never understand the industry that you're in fully. But there isn't a right pathway into this. If you have the sustainability angle, I just think you need to understand the industry you're working for.
The path that you've described, perhaps, do you think that exists any longer? We're moving into a stage where that whole universe of sustainability, of requirements, of human resources demands within corporations is becoming much more nuanced and much more specific and specialized. Do you think now the people who want to go from accounting into a sustainability role should augment their skills a little bit? I mean, how would you describe that granular path from saying, right, I'm going to bring my accounting framework, understanding and skills into a sustainability role? Do they need to study something else? Do they need
Of course they do.
I mean, what sort of skills do they need to add to that?
So it also depends on what kind of sustainability officer you want to be. The plethora of types of CSO is vastly different. And I'm going to be slightly provocative here. There is the accountant CSO who essentially does the accounting and does your sustainability report. I'm making this black and white deliberately. Then there is the CSO who is a glorified marketing person. And then there's the CSO, I say very much like Darian, who actually can make change happen in the business. If you are an accountant who wants to get to that level, you do need to do more. You should just focus on getting your accounting skills as having, accounting, like financial accounting, is not the same as greenhouse gas accounting. So the easy bit is to add, no, not easy, but the first bit you would do is you would add on, you would understand the accounting frameworks, you would understand how you do the reporting, because that makes you valuable to other people. Because if you want to make change, data normally helps. I think sometimes we spend too much time thinking about we need to have perfect data, but we'll leave that for another episode. But then I think you cannot not spend time with the business and understand the business. If you can only do reporting and don't understand the business, you're not going to make them convinced to change their business, right? So I think rather, whether you come through an accounting route, if you want to make real impact, you've got to understand the business. And if you come from the business side, you need to understand a little bit about the accounting. You can't not have any of them. What I'm saying is be careful not to fall into the middle bucket that I mentioned, where you become a glorified marketing person. That, I think, is a real trap for a CSO, because you get pulled out of a hat when you need to say something and you get put back in. The good thing for people like me is when you look like me, that role is never a possibility for me, because I look far too skinny and frail for ever be the front page of anything.
Could I go back to what you said about having heart? Because I think that really does come into the role of a lot of chief sustainability officers.
Yeah.
And when young people come to me and ask for advice about how do I get into sustainability, I'll often say, don't just stay in an office. Go out to the field, work on a farm, work on a carbon project, really understand what it means on the ground. And I certainly, in the world of human rights, way too many people speak about human rights without ever having seen how most people live. Was there any particular experience that really changed your perspective on what you want to do as you were on that journey from being an accountant to going more into sustainability?
Yeah, I think there was a few, if I just scroll back through my memory. So the very first reason why I even got into wildlife and animals was because in Denmark, forests are a very safe space, right? The most dangerous creature we have is a squirrel. So it's a very safe place to play as a kid. And one day I saw the chainsaws coming in. Of course, in Denmark, it's not chainsaws like we see it in the Amazon, things just being mowed down. But that was the very first memory I have of, why are we killing these things, right? Then as I was 17, I think there was my first trip out here, helped me put something in. But when I came out here, I distinctly remembered when I saw my first real project, and I realized, oh my God, this is so much more complicated than I thought it was. There's 700 people working on this. The communities, many of them are not literate. And then starting to think through, oh my God, is this just too complex? Should I just go back into my accounting cave again? And then you make a conscious decision, am I willing to try and see if I can do something with this, or am I not? And I remember exactly the place where that first, it was almost like, the first reaction is, oh, it's too big. Then you kind of internalize, and I saw more types of projects, and I realized this is not a problem that it's a big wicked problem, as they call them, but it's solvable. And then I remember a second time I went for, it was on my own account, and you start to become a little bit tainted, or because you see some of these projects where they ask you, they show you, hey, look, we built the school out of this money that we got. And you start to realize, and maybe that's because you're accountant trained, well, you got X million dollars a year, and that's what you built? As in, you start to get through this, maybe I can use my analytical sense to do things better, right? Because one thing is you get amazed and you say, look, I want to help. But you then also need to get to a second realization, there's something I can help with. And that I got from another trip that I had. It was also out here. So it was actually the accumulation of 2 or 3 of these relations. It's always when you were out there. So I very much agree with you. That's when the heart came in and they said, wow. And then the passion is always generated here. It's not generated up here, right? So, yeah.
Quick final question. What was the biggest problem that you had in making the transition, whether it be personal transfer of skills or institutional operational problems that you had? What are the difficulties that people face when they want to change this, make changes like this?
Well, maybe my specific problem was perhaps that it was a little bit early for the time. There wasn't really a lot of CSOs around. So there's a little bit of why should we have such a thing? But I think more generally, I think most of it is fear that's holding people back. They think that they see other people and they think, well, I could never be that, so I won't even try, right? I think if everybody has, if you have the passion and you are willing to put in the work, I think too many young people have either there's 2 problems that they run into. One is they want to be a chief sustainability officer right off the bat and manage a lot of people. That's bound to be a failure. Or they suffer from the other problem, which is, I'm only an accountant, I could never be, because I look at Daria and I look at other people and says, wow, it's so far away I couldn't be it. But the company doesn't see it like that always that you're in, because they don't have all that knowledge, right? So you sometimes just putting up your hand and says, look, I actually think I can help here. It may not be perfect, but look, hey, I'm a cheap resources compared to if you go out and you do something else, right? You hire a consultancy company to tell you what the game plan is. I think you need to overcome a little bit of that. But it takes a little bit of courage, because people, you're afraid of people saying, but you're just an accountant, right? Why do you think you have anything to contribute? So you either end up by people having an inflated view because they can spell ESG, or you come from the other way around, you can't spell ESG, but you actually know what you're going to do, but you're too afraid to ask.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thanks for watching. Now, the whole purpose of this series is to be able to inspire others to take action to make their careers more green and to think about how they can influence the green agenda within the companies that they already work for. And I hope if you are inspired at all, then you'll get in touch and engage with us a bit.
Now, we know just from speaking with all of our guests that this can sometimes be a minefield. It's hard to know where to start, what are the best courses, what are the best sources of information. So if you'd like to get in contact, please email us on the email below or contact us through LinkedIn.
And if you have any thoughts about kind of subjects you'd like to hear us discuss, or people or industries that you'd like featured on the conversation, let us know about that as well. Get in touch.
Thank you.